Hey, Sammy here. I'm not your typical job counselor. I work remote and I travel the world as I kickstart careers. This is raw, real, and on the road.
Hi, I'm Sammy, and this is the Career Kickstart Show. I am super excited to have Kasey on the show with me today. Kasey Kesner let me just tell you how I met her. I met her last May in New York City at the Be True Brand New Live event. And I was nervous, under-caffeinated, and it was like 8 in the morning, and I was already having jet lag because I'd flown in. And I see one person in this, kind of nervous, kind of uncaffeinated, kind of still, trying to wake up group of women. There was one person who actually seemed to be awake, and she was just smiling and going around the room like this delightful social butterfly. And that was Kasey. And ever since then, she has been shining her light on the internet and also working with people one-to-one in her area on yoga, wellness, and all sorts of, I'll just let her explain, and she can give you the Bay Girl explanation of what she does. Also, fun fact, really cool hair. So, Kasey, tell everybody who's listening what you do besides have cool hair.
Cool. Well, thank you for the hair compliment. I like to say I'm a natural pink. I heal voices within bodies and spirits and also personal brands. I like to create trauma-informed spaces and safe spaces for people to begin to develop a really strong foundation. And with a strong foundation, I think that's like where you can begin to grow, whether that's in self-development or your business. And sometimes we have a lot of different passions. I'm multi-passionate. And so the landscape can get a little jumbly and get confusing. And I think I see a lot of struggle with this with my clients, of not knowing what the real voice is and not knowing what feels safe presenting to the world. And so I work with people one-on-one to just kind of find that zen within and bring in some mindfulness in business. And whether that means we're doing this through somatic movements and through yoga, or just through some other means of creative self-expression, like I'm in it to just kind of help guide you to be your best teacher.
Awesome. I love that. And I love the positivity that you just simply radiate and then you bring to your work. And for my topic, career development, one thing that I have noticed is that mindset and also confidence and that sense of psychological safety that can help people. It can also hinder them if they kind of have deficiencies in that area. And I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about self-care in the workplace and maybe jam on that topic a little bit.
Okay, all right. So self-care in the workplace, I think my relationship historically with self-care in the workplace has been unbalanced at best. And I think that is exactly why I've kind of kicked the traditional 9-to-5 out the window and built a business for myself, because it depends on where you're at. So, let's just talk about like cubicle life, for example. You can do so much in your space, whether that is taking 5 minutes to kind of spin your chair away from the computer monitor and take a breather and begin to just cope with the environment that you're in, because the environment isn't like, it's not designed for us. It's artificial, right? So you've got artificial lighting and lots of plastic and electronics, and there's different tones whirring and buzzing from your computer or the speakers or your neighbors. And it becomes this symphony of like cacophony, and it can be a sensory overload. And so for good self-care, I think the first step is to unplug for just 5 minutes when you're starting to feel that tension in your neck, in your shoulders. And that's an area that I focus on mostly. It's a good indicator if you're holding stress. That's where a lot of it resides in our bodies. And it's also okay if you don't notice that in your neck and shoulders, because sometimes we are just doing the best we can to get through the day, right? And so we begin to dissociate from our bodies a little bit. We got to make this deadline. We got to submit this email. The reports are due. And we begin to just separate what's vital, I think. And really, if we can begin to recenter and come back into kind of our life force, ourselves, feeling the air on our skin, feeling the temperature of the room, and noticing these basic sensations, we can feel a sense of calm, safety, and with that, we create that sense of emotional calm, and it extends psychologically too. So if you're in a happy, joyful place mentally, I mean, those reports are a lot easier to write when you're feeling good about it. You know, data entry, things like that. Those have been historically the roles that I've had. It's just like, you know, monotonous stuff, which can be meditative in some ways, you know, doing the same thing over and over.
I do admit, when I did work retail, there was something that I found so soothing about just arranging the shelves. Like, people knew when I came in for my shift that everything would be dusted and like arranged, because that was like, okay, this is my moment of getting away from those customers, and I'm just going to make this look beautiful.
Yeah, no, I think, and if you're a strategic thinker, and creative folks do this too, like we're trying to find like the most efficient way to do things and like streamline processes. So, you know, oftentimes like I keep going to reports, but like, you know, whatever your work is, like finding if it's something that you have to do daily, maybe like play these little games with yourself of like, okay, I was able to process this report in like 15 minutes yesterday. Can I get it down to 10? You know, so just finding like little clever games to keep your mind occupied. So self-care in the workplace, we can only do so much with the environment that we're in. You know, some places have pretty strict rules or strict protocol, and it's about finding what you can bring into it. I mean, really, to produce calm, you don't need anything additional. You don't need a meditation stool to bring into work. You don't need a cushion or any special apparatus. For me, it is setting up boundaries. You know, if your boss is overextending you in any way, you know, I see this a lot in people who are high performers in the workplace. You know, they get things done quicker, and so oftentimes they're the first person that the supervisor goes to get a job or a task done.
Mm-hmm. The reward for good work is just more good work.
Yeah, and I've seen it, and I can speak from personal experience. That's kind of been my thing, and establishing firm boundaries for yourself, and knowing that it is okay to say no.
Mm-hmm. And it's okay to, like, one thing that a friend did recently when she got a new team lead that I thought was clever was she wrote an email that was pretty much how to manage me. And it was just like, she was like, this is my personality. I like being validated after I do things. I like being able to have this kind of open dialogue. And she pretty much was like, here is your like ABC guide to like me. And I feel like that can be so helpful for people because nobody's a mind reader. And you know, there are a lot of people who do, you know, a lot of professional development on leadership, but sometimes if they can get, you know, kind of like a bit of a treasure map, so they can be like, oh, okay, this is how we can get productivity, and we will be speaking to each other at the Christmas party, you know, that will do. So I thought that was pretty clever, but you're right, boundaries can be, at least for me, Oh my God, it's so difficult. As a Leo, I want people to like me. Like, and it becomes like a struggle between the side of me that wants to be a Billy Badass and the side of me that's just like, love me. Please just love me.
I'm a Taurus, and I am one of those. They say that Tauruses are bullheaded, but I really think it's just that we like stability, and we don't like things to be shifted around too much. So I stay in my. There's something to be said about staying in your comfort zone, or to rephrase, your zone of genius, and and there's strength in that, and your skill sets, and I don't know, like for me, the boundaries help keep an informed space for me to like just work from and to let everybody else know where I'm operating from too. And you bring up a good point with that kind of like roadmap of how to work with me. I see this a lot with the clients that I work with. They're curious about their personal style. They say, I know that I do this and that, but I don't know they can't see it from 10,000 feet up, and that's okay. And that's exactly what we kind of like work with. And there are a lot of great assessments online to take just to figure out, a blueprint of what might be your strength. And some are free and some might be like $40. What is it? The Colby assessment. Yeah. That's a good one. And there's another one I took recently.
Ooh, 16 personalities. Have you taken that one where it's like, all I remember of it has the Myers-Briggs, but it has the cute cartoons.
Oh yeah, I have. I'm an ENFP, and I can't remember the other one I took recently. It was pretty cool. And it wasn't free. I'll have to search for that. But yeah, so like just figuring out, like we all have these strengths, and we all have areas where we're developing, or where we're, challenging the skill sets that we're pretty familiar with, and just kind of developing ourselves further. And the more that we get to know ourselves, like the clearer those strengths become. And when that aligns, now this is going to sound really woo-woo, but
I like it. Lay it down.
So I believe wholeheartedly in that, like, that search for who you are inside is really similar to like the results of those assessments. You're just going online and somebody's asking you these questions. You can do this without these assessments. It's like it's called self-discovery. And like you get to make your results like what you want. Are you a creative person? Cool. All right. That's a strength. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, like that is what I see from creative people. I work with a lot of creative and talented people, and they want to hide that. They're like, well, people think that I'm aloof and I'm like a little too out there. Nobody takes me seriously. And the truth is, like, those people that don't take you seriously for being creative, you don't want to work with them anyway. Like, get out of there. Like, what I kind of teach is this ownership of your story, of even the things that you think like, I'm not really proud of this. I'm a procrastinator and like this or that. We kind of just reframe it. Like, well, maybe you're not a procrastinator. Maybe you're stimulated through like multifaceted activities and, assignments, and you want to be in a role that's a little more liberal. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's when we're put into jobs that just aren't a really good fit for us, and we hold on to them because, hey, it's a job and it's got health insurance maybe, and money and stability and predictability. That is all well and good if you are happy at the end of the day. But if you are finding that you are coming home and you're depleted, and you're taking ibuprofen probably a little too much through the week to mitigate a headache, then that's an indicator of a larger possible issue. Mm-hmm. And so through this, like we can begin to like through these assessments and kind of settling in, whether it's just taking 5 minutes to to clear your mind and just come back to that blank slate, because that's like where it sounds so anecdotal, but like it's like a cauldron. So like when you empty everything out and clear everything out, you get to choose what you add back in. And I think it's a lot harder to have this big soupy mess and to try and figure out like who you are and what you do while everything is in there. Like I have a philosophy that like we just pare everything down, we clear everything out, and then we actively choose what we want to design for ourselves, what we want to design for our lives, our careers, things like that. So it's really simple.
I love that, because it is so true. That's one of the biggest things that I come up with as, a career specialist, is that everybody is so trained to deny the stuff that makes them unique and also the stuff that makes them an asset. Like having creativity is one of the biggest things that companies look for, especially for the sort of jobs that can't get outsourced and can't get automated. So I'm always telling people, if you are an artist and you have that creative thinking, think outside the box. Think about a career like in user experience design or something like that. There's so much that people can do to sort of reframe, those sort of attributes. Like for me, I always felt like it was maybe like a bad thing that I could like quick start some projects and then I'd pivot and like delegate it to one of those people that can really like do really good follow through. I'm someone who's like, give me, some yerba mate and a laptop in a weekend, and I will make you a funnel. I will, design you a complete, job search strategy or a new internship program, great at that. And then the follow through, I'm just like, I'm going to have reminders to make myself keep doing this. But now I just work with it. So that's why I've pivoted a lot of my job duties with the startup that I work with to be stuff where I'm always creating something new, because it wasn't really follow through. It's just that I like that newness. So every month I do a new little like challenge for the student community and stuff like that. And it keeps me happy and it works well with the students. It works well for the company. So there's so many ways that we can turn what we're good at, how our brains work, and actually make that something that makes us stand out in a good way. Not like, oh God, Gardner, she can never send a follow-up email. Now you're like, ooh, the initiative on that one. At least that's what I tell myself people think, but nobody's corrected me, so maybe they do think that.
Yeah, I'm actually, I don't know if any of my friends will be listening to this, but they know I'm notorious for like not following up on emails or text. Just try multiple points of entry. You'll get a hold of me eventually. It's just, there's so many different ways to contact people that sometimes like I just pare it down and I'm only going to answer like Facebook messages today. I'll check my email later, and like kind of like simplifying my life. Because everything I know this sounds so cliche, but like technology these days, it's just everything's so fast, and it's very easy to just get too stimulated. And if you can choose to, eliminate what you don't need, even for just a day, you can always add it back in the next day. That's just one simple thing that you can do each week, or maybe, one day at the end of the week, like you may have created, how many hours of calm and focus. So it's not like wellness just one day it is bestowed upon you, like, all right, I'm like perfectly balanced and everything's awesome. No person is like entirely like this pillar of health. It's a balance and it's a process. So with that in mind, like I kind of extend that into everything. Like macro and micro, like it's a process. So like today I don't have to be perfect. Today I don't have to answer all those emails. Tomorrow is another day, which could be a slippery slope, but know yourself and know that you're going to get to it. I kind of come from a place where I don't like shame at all. Like it is a shame-free zone in my world. And so I kind of, I try my best to create spaces that are trauma informed, whether that's in the yoga studio or, it's in the workplace or it's with my clients. I'm not perfect, but the best of my ability, I try and be aware of triggers. And this is kind of a buzzword these days, but it's important because that feeling of exhaustion, or maybe you're sitting at a computer and you just, like you've been sitting at the computer for 15 minutes, for 20 minutes, and nothing's coming out. And what is this about? And we can begin that shame spiral where we're just like, oh gosh, I'm a horrible, I'm just not a good worker. I'm lazy, all of this inner bullying. If you notice that pattern, and can witness it and remove yourself, like step out of that spiral before it gets too deep. But a lot of times we can't because it's a trigger. And that's probably the one thing that if I could share with the world right now, like, I'd want to get the point across that triggers, when it happens, we're not operating from a logic point of the brain anymore. Like logic systems shut down when we are triggered by an experience that maybe reminds us of like an abnormal experience from our past. So magical chemistry begins in the brain, and the logic systems just shift and we operate from a survival part of the brain, that fight, flight, or freeze response. And some people can be in one zone more than others. Like I'm probably a freezer mostly. I just hold still and I get real quiet. And some people, you might have expressions of frustration or anger. Whatever it is, like if you feel like the train has gone off the tracks or this pattern continues, oftentimes it's probably indicative of a trauma-based response. And, more on that later, but from a workplace standpoint, when a boss comes in and steps into your office and demands something or gives you passive aggressiveness, and you notice a reaction that is probably, one of those ones that you want to bite your tongue. You can't tell off your boss, but inside you're feeling bad. You're feeling emotions that aren't, the joy and the lightness and the buoyancy. And then they kind of extend for the rest of the day. Like, I don't think that anybody is deserving of that from another person. Mm-hmm. It's emotional bullying. And what I try and offer to people kind of educationally is how you can be an advocate for safer spaces in the workplace. And maybe you're not a boss, maybe you're not a supervisor, but you're a peer in the workplace. You can do a few things to keep your coworkers, stress-free as best you can, and create a community in your workplace too. And that starts by being compassionate. It's not a hard thing to do, but it kind of is at the same time.
What I love about what you're saying is that there's actually a lot of, okay, let me start this, is that I hear a lot of people who can kind of get dismissive of triggers or safe spaces, but there is clear research that the number one reason why people leave companies is not the company, it's the manager. And there's a lot of research about how psychological safety improves productivity, creativity, initiative. Yet we have so many people who act like, people are being crybabies, or millennial snowflakes with their avocado toast and their desire for respect. Such a millennial thing to want, respect.
Yeah.
But it's very clear that if you look at the data, if you look at, even if you're just like a cold, like Monty Burns, like business sort of like side of it, it makes business sense. It makes like just like being a decent human sense to have a workspace where, you can operate with a sense of psychological security. And like, even if you do have triggers or different things that, doesn't work with your personality, for me, I'm an introvert. So I have a very social job. So I schedule a lot of my calls that I have with students and clients, and then with my freelance clients. I make that stuff on the beginning of the week. And then I have my fun stuff, like you, interviewing you, I have that towards the end of the week. So as I go through the week, because I always start the week where, like, Monday, that's my day to begin again. That is my day to, like, stop eating Cheetos in the morning. That's my day to, like, get a carrot in my system. That's when I'm like, I'm going to take on the world. And then, of course, slowly that feeling goes to where my ambitions are like, I'm going to brush my hair, towards the weekend. But the beginning of the week, I'm strong. And that's when I have my client calls, all my social things. That's when I do that. And having containers, that's completely possible. You just got to know yourself and how you work. And I know that I'm so much more ambitious on Mondays than any other day for some reason.
I think that's great insight, though, because there is no wrong way of being productive. I mean, as a life force, you are just by default a creative human being. You're creating things, it doesn't, and I don't think that our worth as a human being is determined by how much or little we create. So with that in mind, no matter what we do, is the best possible thing that we are capable of doing. And so, like, if you don't fit inside the box, if like you work at a job that is, you have to produce and make those calls, not just on Monday, but Monday through Friday, and it feels like you're overextending yourself, well, that's when we have to begin asking, is this a good fit or not? And looking for another job where all of those needs are met, or creating your own when there isn't something that's already there. And using that creativity, because I guess the way that I see it is, if you kind of go into your area of strength, if you want to go and create a business for yourself, and that will make you more productive because you're operating in a sequence that works with you, well, you might be more productive working for yourself than you ever would have been in like a 9-to-5 job. So like, there's no wrong way of doing it. There's no wrong having a 9-to-5. There's nothing wrong about that. I really, really wanted one for years and I tried. And then when I finally found that like full-time with benefits job, I realized that like everything I had been chasing was like towards the wrong direction. It was towards everybody else's goals, not my own. And so the reason I did that is because I think I was afraid of the shame monster. I was afraid of what people might think of me if I had like I would like to neatly, check off the boxes. Because I think there's a social justice issue kind of tied into this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm from West Virginia, and I grew up in a low-income community. Mm-hmm. All right, so it sounds like we're setting
the scene here. We're setting the scene. Yeah. Let's do it.
And so, okay, if opportunity is rare in your community. There are like maybe 3 or 4 major industries in West Virginia: coal, pharmaceutical industry, and maybe university, academia, or hospitals. So like research-based stuff. So a coal miner, I guess I could do it. I think I would probably
I'm
meet some different challenges.
Okay.
Pharmaceutical industry, you have to have a certain level of education, and the same with working in academia. So, all right, so now you have to afford certain number of years in school, which takes you out of the workforce. And if you don't have a college fund, well, now you're going to be going into debt just to be able to stay in your community. So there's a problem there. And the other thing is that if job opportunities are scarce and you do get that stable job, you want to hold on to it with all your might, because this is the promise of a better future for you, for your family, and nothing is going to come in the way or compromise that. So now what if you're forcing yourself into this so that way you can stay in your community that doesn't have a lot of opportunity, and you might need to stay here for other reasons. Maybe you have family that, for me, like I have a lot of deep roots here and my family isn't moving. I'm like a 4th generation West Virginian. And a lot of people will say like, well, if there's no jobs, why don't you move? Like, it's okay. I'm really glad you simplified it for me. There's a lot of more complex,
You have to afford to move. I worked for a homeless drop-in space that had like runaway, transgender teens, and people would be like, "Why they go somewhere else?" And I'm like, "Who hires really? How is when they got to get there? 2, they got to hope they can find a job there. 3, when you have to re-enroll on the state health insurance if you need it, or any of those sort of benefits, that takes forever." Honestly, if you've never applied for any sort of food stamps or help somebody, you'd be surprised how long, even veterans. I thought there was a red carpet line where you doff your Navy cap and they're this way, sir. No, they do not. So it's so much more complicated, and I'm glad that you share that. Sorry, I got so excited for a second.
No, I'm really glad.
Ooh.
And my passion about this issue stems from my experience with it. So, I went to college. I was a 1st generation college student, and I didn't come with any money. I just took out all these loans, and I went and I got a liberal arts degree and a half, pretty much. And then by the time I graduated, that's when the economic recession hit, and there was a hiring freeze absolutely everywhere. So I was couch surfing for a while. I was sleeping on friends' couches or my car, just to make ends meet. And I had to go on government assistance for a while, and I got a temp job. So that was my foot in the door. It was just a 5-month job, but it was enough for me to be like, thank goodness. And then when that job was over, basically it was part-time jobs from there on out. So I would have 3 part-time jobs, one in the AM, one in the afternoon, and one in the evening, basically taking a nap in between each one and catching a bus that only operated till 6 p.m. So then you have to find a ride. It's chaos and it's exhausting, and you don't have any time for self-care. And so people that are, let's just imagine your body is just buzzing with it's trying to survive. So you've got adrenaline pumping through your veins to keep you awake, and you're actually exhausted at the same time. And so going into an environment where there are potential triggers. Wow. To have a body that is just very tired and to work in a situation where your health might be compromised, this is just, it's just like a crisis on top of another one. And it's very, very hard to get out from under that. It took me about 2 years. before I was back on my feet. And I remember calling the Department of Health and Human Resources to call and cancel, to stop my my food stamps. And they didn't understand. You're like, wait, what? And I said, I found a job. I don't need these anymore. And they're like, nobody's ever called us for this before. Like, you just ride out your benefits until you're good. But like, the other thing is the stigma of asking for assistance too. So, you know, oh, the talk is real harsh. It's real hard.
It is.
Because
it's so real.
It's not what you think it is, you know? Like, there is a heavy vetting that goes into qualifying for food stamps. And without that, honest to goodness, I just really don't know what I would have done. And it was able to provide me with fresh food. Like, and who cares if it wasn't fresh? If you want to buy a Mountain Dew with your food stamps, treat yourself. Like, you've had a rough week, man.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there you go. If you have to get to the next job, that might be what's going to keep you going. And your story is not unusual for our generation. Like, let's be real. Especially since people aren't taught how to job search. They're not really given really great advice on what kind of education you need, how you can get it, you know. You don't always learn that self-starting initiative. And then on the flip side is that, you know, we don't all have like grandma's canning and pickling skills. So it's not even like you're like, I will go out into the hills. No, you'll die out there. You'll die naked and afraid because you don't know how to sew shit, you know? So I don't know why I went on that tangent. Nobody go into the wilderness. But it is a serious issue. And that's why I'm so passionate when I work with people to think about, one, not even just how like to get that job, how to design a career. That can include multiple revenue streams, that can include freelancing. And sometimes it's talking to people and really like laying down their options where we're kind of told you need to get on somebody's payroll. However, like one of my sisters, she's been a receptionist for years at a vet's office, minimum wage. It's one of those things where since she lives out in the country, you know, a lot of her paycheck goes right into her tank, you know, and she used to do housekeeping. And she's going to get back into that because she's worked it out. And yeah, you know, she got a little bit more respect as like, I guess, a receptionist, but she made more money as a housekeeper. And she could make her own schedule then. And she had a couple of clients, you know, that she just pretty much would just, and she actually likes doing it. It's kind of zenful for her. But you're not really like, nobody sits you down and are like, okay, once you get out of how like scary initially self-employment taxes are, this is the deal. This is what you can do. But nobody really, one, teaches people how to look for jobs. Two, like has like a heart to heart and just be like, what are your skills? What are you interested in? And what will kind of bore you? Because sometimes we get into stuff, and I hear this all the time where they're like, I went, you know, I got a whole college degree in this. I had, you know, my first year working that position. And I'm like, why did I do this? That happens all the time with people who are like, I've only been in my career for a year and I want to change it. And I'm usually like, let me help you.
That's beautiful. Like that you can craft that. I love what you do.
Well,
it's such a valuable resource.
Thank you. That was my jam when I worked for a trans advocacy organization. That was my big push. Like when people in, you know, I've been traveling for a while, but people in Tucson would be like, oh, okay, that's the one who, like, if you have like a trans kid who needs a job or needs to go to college, people would be like, okay, that one. You know what's going on in this town, which to this day, I'm still like, oh, my babies who would graduate or they're, you know, they're on like year 2 of being, you know, in a job and in housing. You're just like, my babies.
Yeah. I think the job search, I mean, it gets real fast.
It does. Holy crap. Why did we want to grow up?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely bought into the, okay, I got a degree. Someone's going to just hand me a job. Like, I got a degree. And that's okay. I mean, lessons learned.
I mean, it used to be that way. Like,
yeah. And I don't, I come from a family, my parents had a high school education. So as far as like mentoring me, what to do with a college degree or, college career, I was on my own in that. So I just kind of went with what I saw in television and, like a New Yorker having it all and, applying to every, a job at a magazine and getting in. Didn't happen that way. But silver lining, man, I got really good at writing cover letters and resumes. Because every time I would apply, I mean, I wasn't getting the jobs. And now it's up for debate on like why I wasn't a good candidate, or if they already had somebody in mind. Sometimes jobs, have to advertise, but they already have an internal applicant in mind. It could have been anything, but that meant that I needed to just keep applying. And it seems like, and I don't know if the people that you work with have the same complaint, but every place you apply to has a completely radically different way that they want your information. And you have to that is the worst. Like you can't just, I wish it were as easy as just uploading your PDF and like being done with it. But like they want you to type everything out.
Sometimes multiple times. Oh my God. And like, for jobs that, okay, this is not my proudest, I guess, highlight of my life. But I remember when I was between like college and grad school or home from college or something. And I knew I needed to get a job because if I didn't, then one of my sisters, because I have a lot of sisters. I'm actually from the part of New York State that has the northernmost of the Appalachians, so I understand what you're talking about. Except we had oil. We no longer have that. So I knew that I had to get a job or else I would be the nanny for the summer. And Walmart was walking distance, so I like trotted over there and I'm like, this is going to be easy. I've done retail before. I don't steal. I'm not going to make meth in the bathroom. I'm a shoo-in. And I failed their personality test. They had like, I swear to God, it was like 40 pages. Like you didn't just like, you had to type in like an application form that was like 3 pages of a bunch of different information and then 40 pages of personality test. And apparently I don't have a personality suitable for Walmart. I did for Radio Shack though, but not for Walmart.
Listen, I can relate so much to this. I had at one point moved to this very small coal mining town, and the only jobs available were at a grocery store or Lowe's. And I was like, all right, I'm going to work in the plant department at Lowe's. I'm just going to be around flowers all day. This is going to be awesome. I failed that personality thing too. I was just like, I remember the questions as they were presented and like knowing probably what they wanted to hear, but I felt like it was unethical to like
I did the same thing.
I was like, they should probably just know who I am. I'm just going to answer this honestly.
Oh yeah, I made the same mistake. Oh God. Oh, when you're young and you want to be honest, then you get old and bitter and you're like, I ain't telling nobody the truth.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Yeah. But,
yeah.
Lessons learned.
You know what, and that's the thing is that it takes all kinds, and eventually you can end up somewhere. But for me, I hold that, and I reframe it sometimes. If I'm thinking, well, what does that say about me? I'm like, what does that say about Walmart?
Right? Come on. I don't know, like throughout this whole, my job search way back when, I have amassed this chronicle of, skills from all of the very varied jobs that I've had. And through that, I have a spreadsheet somewhere of like everything that I did, at that job, and like not even just the like abilities that I had, but like the skill set and the knowledge that I attained. And like I had it all in different columns depending on industry. So like if I was applying for a job in hospitality, here's how I would describe, my skill set for an application into hospitality services.
That's clever.
But it was exhausting, right? So I have like, I put a lot of work into this, but to streamline the application process. So, I'm churning out like, it felt like 100 a week, but I know it was probably like 20. But I think all in all, over a span of like maybe 5 or 7 years, I applied to like 200 different jobs. And some I got and some I didn't, but I didn't want it all to be for nothing. And so like, I would honestly write a new cover letter, a new resume for every single job that I applied to. I didn't do a standard, bulleted thing. And, I guess some people might be listening to this and think like, well, maybe you're just really bad at writing cover letters and resumes. But, when it came time to like, when that, screw it, I'm just going to be me moment hit, man, that's when everything turned on. I got a job as a copywriter. It was like for a podcast that I like really admired. I really loved it. And they were looking for new writers. And I just sent them a message. And I was just like, I think I said like, I'm the best fucking writer there is. And I said to them,
nice.
Yeah. And they called me back right away. And I was like, I've never done that before. But like when you can get really rooted and grounded in yourself and like where you're at in your journey. So like at that point, I was like this frustrated badass that was just like, burn it all down. I'm going to get what's mine.
I love it.
People read that personal power. And so there's something about like crafting a story about where you're at and what you want, that you can weave in to, the application process.
Yes, this is so true. I tell people that vibe is, it's that nebulous sort of thing. It's hard to describe a vibe. But when you walk into that interview, they have already, and people can sense it. I know some HR people and recruiter who swear to God, they are like Miss Cleo with a resume. They'll look at it and they're like, I already know this person. Bam. Like energetically, they feel like they're reading. And in some ways, that can be true. And then when you get into the interview, that vibe, that confidence, being able to tell your story in a way that's relevant to them, that is one of the biggest skills. And that's one of the hardest for people to learn. I know I worked with, he was so sweet, this sweet young man from Utah. And when I asked him, and we were doing a mock interview, I was like, tell me about yourself. And he started with, well, my people come from Washington, where my grandpa was born. But then, in the 1950s, we moved into, the Salt River Valley. And then, like, it was just, like, pretty much a Ken Burns documentary of this man's life story. And, like, I wanted to be like, no. Let's close this. That is, you're so endearing, and I love this, but this will not help you get a web development position unless it's for Prairie Home Companion. And we know that staff is in turmoil right now because we all know anyway, I won't get into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is so important. And as we're getting close to the end of the interview, I'd love it if you could share, like, maybe 2 or 3 quick tips on how people can really kind of get more in touch with their own personal narrative and their story, because you can empower yourself. I'm going to go on another tangent, but for me, the biggest thing that helped me on my journey for confidence and stuff like that was to stop having the milestones in my life be crappy things that happened or crappy events. Once I was like, instead of like, oh, that was like, I don't know, the partner that cheated on me, or that was when I lost that job. Instead, I was like, how about I describe my 20s like I finally got my master's degree. I went here and I did this, as opposed to injustice number 1, injustice number 2. And that really helped me. But you can give your own tips.
No, I think that's something really cool to go off of too, because like it is kind of, it's branding yourself in a different way. Like you can still think, you can still have those experiences. Like they're very valid, they're very real, but you can redesign what you express to people. So, kind of going off of that, you made me think about language. So like twofold. One, listening. I know I'm a talker and I've talked a lot during this.
I like it.
Engaged and so excited to be on the show. But a turning point for me was shutting up. Because there's this like kind of achievement mindset of like wanting to be visible and wanting to be heard so bad that you're just elbowing your way in. And that energy almost is intrusive and can be a little, I think it's a case-by-case scenario. But for me, when I felt lost, the way I found myself and found this voice was by listening like wholeheartedly and compassionately to what other people were saying. And I heard people struggling and I heard their hurts. And I also heard what people loved about me. And I was able to begin to accept that. Because it's so easy when people say like, oh, you're so effervescent, to be like, oh no, well, I had a bad day today. You should have seen me earlier.
I know. We're almost like trained when we get a compliment to be like, no, I'm a big piece of shit, and you know it.
Yeah.
Like, why is that a reaction? Why can't we be like, thank you?
Yeah. And so I think I did this for like a year, maybe 2 years. I'm not sure, of just kind of this like personality detox of where I was just like, you know what, like I need to figure out like who I am. I'm not saying that everybody has to do it like that long, but when people would say like, oh man, like it's a rainy day, it's really crappy out, I had the worst time here, and just pausing and acknowledging them and not offering anything back, which might feel like awkward as fuck, but hear me out. Like what happens in that space is that the other person energetically, like it's kind of like we have rules of conversations that we may not be aware of, like this kind of like, I exchange something to you and then you say something back to me, and then we like kind of have this stroke to each other. I don't want to say their ego, but anyway.
Stroking each other, gotcha.
Yeah,
It's gonna be like, ooh, go on in.
Yeah, this is kind of like rewarding by validating what somebody's saying. So what happens when, somebody comes into a room and they say, it doesn't matter, like, talking about the weather, and you can just see them, hear them, maybe you even nod, and then see what happens next. What I found in my own personal research through my lens is that people kept talking. And I'm still uncertain whether it was like out of anxiety, because there's this need to fill the void with noise. But like what really was happening was as they kept talking, their need to fill that space with something, they were pulling deep. You know, they were kind of beginning to scramble. And so what they were pulling out were things that were probably deeper and a little bit more vulnerable. Because we can do this kind of superficial tit for tat back and forth, or we can hold space for the other person and really listen to see what beyond the surface level is really happening. And if you're in business for yourself, this is I think it's a really clever hack, because you get to give somebody a chance to be connected to you in a really personal way. And oftentimes I think I was very surprised at how often I would hear the struggle, hear what was really going on with people. And from that, you know, you can be a problem solver for other people. You can be service-based by listening to the needs of other people. So kind of to switch it back around, what was really empowering to me was to know what it was that I kind of felt like cosmically, like I could help people with, like the things that, like when people were saying they were shutting down or they were getting really stressed out, or like they would ask me, you know, how do you find like that Zen? How can you be so happy? Well, I'm actually just a multifaceted human being like anybody else. I have my off days, and, you know, caffeine takes me there to better places, but using empowering language too. So you can describe having a bad day in an empowering way. So, you know, I forgot to get coffee this morning. A lot of my analogies are caffeine related. And you could say, it was a shit day. Like, I'm not myself. Or you can say, you know, like, man, this morning I'm really focusing my energy on staying awake. Okay, so which sounds more empowering? Like, I forgot I needed to do this. I had to. I'm irresponsible. Or I am focusing on an active thing that I'm going to begin to develop. And that takes a lot of practice. So, like, that's not a thing that people just do overnight. But it gets easier by listening to what people are saying. Because when you can hear the struggle, then you can offer the ways that you can help. And that innately is empowering. It's a solution. It's active. So that's probably my go-to, is to just be a compassionate set of ears. And I talk so much about listening that I've probably forgotten the question, but it's
I like that. You know, being able to tell your story is something that it's like, if you're going to be a writer, you need to read some books, you know. So when you're really trying to develop your own ability to tell your story, and not just to, like, you know, maybe you wrote it out, but to, like, really feel it and to really sell it when you're in an interview, or maybe you're doing a business pitch or something. It is so good to be able to hear other people. One, I love your idea of service, because for me, when I worked at that center that I talked about before, I was coming out of, you know, your classic mid-20s meltdown, and it got my head out of my own navel. You know what I mean? Where sometimes it's nice to just be like, somebody else's problems. How refreshing, you know? And then also, I like not always responding with the same sort of negativity when somebody is commenting on something negatively to you. I think there's a lot of power in that, because so often we're trained to sort of parrot that back, except that can, in some ways, subtly sort of change how you are. So if you were like you were saying before, in your example about the weather, if you were like how I am when it rains, because I'm from Arizona, so rain is very novel to me, where you're staring outside the window with some cocoa being like, we have weather, and then somebody else is like, rain from the sky is stupid, and you're like, maybe weather is stupid. No, weather is great. So, you can really do some cool things like that to be on your guard. I first, like, how I kind of utilize that is that I use a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy kind of techniques. That I learned at that center. That was the thing. Like, I worked there, but honest to God, I learned, like, I was such an active participant in all of our wellness circles. I'd be like, oh, we got a worksheet. And participants would be like, oh, I got to do this. And I'm like, yay! I'd be like, my benefits don't cover therapy. Y'all were ordered to be here. I'm not. This is free. I'm working on this.
Yeah.
And I find that if you can kind of rewire your brain, because we're programmed, different programs, but, there are some generalities. And with a lot of women, we're kind of taught in a lot of ways to kind of neglect ourselves, to be in that shame spiral. I mean, the second that somebody throws you a box of tampons when you're like 13 is when like shame officially like begins. Once that day happens, we're just like, oh God, I was such a happy child and now I'm an angry teenage woman.
Yeah. It's like that scene in My Girl where she's just like losing her mind when she starts her period. And I'm like, oh my
God, I love that movie. I was talking about that the other day. Oh, My Girl.
Yeah. I didn't know how to put a pop culture reference in there somehow.
I love it. But yeah,
I think
go on.
that you're right about like rewiring the brain. And I got really excited when you said that because I think that that's part of my philosophy about like trauma-informed spaces and healing is that, our brain is incredibly resilient and adaptive. So, if you're finding, just because from a lens of PTSD, survivors can begin to change their brain through some really unique therapies that are out there. If you get a chance, check into EMDR therapy. It's so cool. It's kind of based on this, where our brain goes to process information during REM phase of sleep. And it really does. It operates the right and left hemispheres of the brain. So it keeps the corpus callosum essentially open. So things that felt like really abstract can kind of pass over and get compartmentalized and put away in the left brain. And it helps with healing and the way that we experience trauma or, how much a situation bothers you is so greatly diminished after that kind of therapy. So like with that in mind, I know the brain just has this opportunity to heal. And so if that is possible, what else is possible? Can we begin to redevelop our behaviors, the way that we speak and express ourselves? I think absolutely.
Yes. And it's not just for people who have experienced trauma, extreme or otherwise. One of the things that I noticed that's been very common among people that I know, men and women, all ages, all genders, when they have trauma is that they always say stuff like there's always somebody who had it worse. I just need to pull on my bootstrap and have a stiff upper lip and leatherize myself. And it's like, you don't need to. You don't need to have somebody give you like a card that says victim, deserving of sympathy and self-care and respect. You literally just get that. Like once you're born and they slap you on the booty, that's exactly when you get that.
Yeah.
So you don't need permission to take care of yourself, but you can utilize these tools and these resources to make your brain a better place to live. Kasey, it has been so much fun having you on my show. This is going to be like an extra special, longer edition, but I don't think I'm going to edit out too much, besides the interruption of my mother singing, which for people listening at home, maybe I'll add that to the end. But let everybody know who's listening, because after this, they've all fallen in love with you. They want to contact you and learn more about you. So tell me where they can reach you and what you're working on next.
Aw, shucks. Okay. Well, I think my website's probably the hub for all things Kasey. And it's just my name, KaseyKesner.com. There you're going to find a free downloadable guided meditation. So if you've never done meditation before in your life and you're like, nope, it's too hard, I don't know what I'm doing, this is only 5 minutes and I walk you through it. So you can hear the soothing sounds of me telling you how to sit still, and it's painless. And I bet you anything, you're going to walk away with a little more zen and, taking a big breath of fresh air afterwards. You'll have a whole new perspective on life. So you can do that there. And also it's the hub where you can find, I'm pretty active on my Instagram stories these days. I love that. That's so cool. I get to talk to everybody and it's a big community. But the next project that I'm working on is actually to ramp up and prepare for the launch of my podcast, which is I Surrender with Kasey Kesner. And we'll talk about ways that, people find to be a tool for growth. So stay tuned on that. And of course, I'm going to be populating some videos here pretty soon on some basic techniques on how you can bring a little bit more calm into your day, whether that is through yoga or just taking a chance and doing something a little bit out of your comfort zone and finding a little bit more happiness in the moments in between all the chaos. So that's it.
I love it. Thank you, Kasey. Thank you so much for being on the show. I loved it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It was so much fun. And thank you to everyone who is listening. As always, I'm Sammy Gardner. This is the Career Kickstart Show. Bye.
Find something cool at cool.careerkickstartacademy.com.
Okay, good, because she just walked in the door and just started singing something, and I was just like, oh, God, the day I forget to close the door, so I'm staying here for the holidays.
Like a musical interlude out, like how they do at the Oscars, like time or something like that. Like,
we're playing you off now, Johnny. Mom, I'm doing a podcast. Don't yell up here or sing anymore. Thanks.